Hey, Jenny Bradley here with Triangle Smart Divorce. This is Mark Wooten, mortgage banker with First Home Mortgage, and I brought Mark in today to ask him a couple of questions that we're seeing pop up a lot more with us, people who aren't married and they want to get a piece of home ownership, but we're dating this a little bit, but it's 2024. Mortgage rates, well, they ain't anywhere where they were in the 70s when my parents were buying a house, but it's still they're higher than they have been. And so people are starting to pool their resources. More people are getting family gifts, those kinds of things to be able to buy real estate. So I wanted to ask you, Mark, from a mortgage perspective, what do you see when people are giving maybe an unmarried couple money to help them buy a house?
Yeah, so obviously, to your point, it's quite common that people are entering into ownership together outside of marriage. It's not a lot different from a mortgage perspective. They're still qualifying. Each of them are using their income and credit to qualify. Most of the time, they're going on the deed together as 50% owners. If there's a parent involved who wants to ensure that their gift is something that they are able to get back in the event things don't work out, I think that's the question, then they could simply become a part of the deed as well. It could be that they are going to have a 20% interest in the property because they're gifting 20% down. That's perfectly legal, and that's something that the attorney can draw up prior to closing so that all three parties essentially are part of the ownership experience.
And from a mortgage banker perspective, that doesn't change your mind about what you guys do if there's now three owners and one has a different percentage than the other one has or anything like that?
Not at all. So we're going to qualify the people that are requesting a loan. We're going to qualify them from an income and debt perspective. They can choose to add whoever they want to title. They could add me to title if they wanted to. It doesn't matter to us. So it's as simple as who's qualifying, and then traditionally they're almost always on title. And then secondly, if there's other parties involved, it's something that is not concerning to the mortgage company.
So back in the 21st century, when I bought my house, there was a big deal at the bank about, is this a loan or is this a gift when your parents were giving you money? And you had to have a gift letter, and you had to have that, and you had to have this, or is that still a thing?
Absolutely. So basically, the gift letter is executed by the donor, and it talks about the relationship to the potential and the fact that it is a true gift. So in other words, I'm gifting to my daughter $10,000 and it's not to be repaid. That's kind of the verbiage that you can expect. So the request is, what's the amount? What's the relationship to the donor? And that it's not to be repaid.
And that doesn't mess anything up if that parent then says, I want to be on title to protect this gift I gave?
Nope. They can be on title. That's really two independent conversations. Because they can be on title even if they don't give a gift.
Sure. Just was clearing that up in case I was confusing anybody. Okay. Well, and from your perspective, I think you may have already answered this one, but I'll just circle back to one thing I was thinking through in my head too. Is it okay if instead of title, they want to do a contract about purchasing a house between all three parties about how, if this relationship goes south, the equity is going to be divided in this property?
Yeah, I don't think that would enter into the mortgage piece of it. So in other words, if they were doing a contract individually on the side, we just want to know who's going to be on title. And if there's gift funds, can we source those funds properly? And then if they enter into a separate contract amongst themselves, I think that's totally fine, but that's kind of outside the realm of what the mortgage underwriter would be interested in.
Yeah. I mean, just by way of example, why I was thinking about that is you said you could go 20% on the title. And I was thinking, well, what if it was just a naked plot of land, undeveloped land, and you were going to build your house there together? Like, would it be fair? And maybe it's not about fairness. Maybe it's just about your family. But would it be fair for that family member who gave you $20,000 down on that house to take a 20% interest in it when you're the one that doing the construction art and building and creating the appreciation and everything else? You could do a contract that says, hey, you get your $20,000 back with no growth or 3% growth or whatever you could agree to, because it's a private contract at that point and the bank doesn't really care about it.
Yeah, if it's a private contract. If you had something that said that you were going to, I would, that gets a little bit, I would say that's probably the right way to handle it. Because if they're getting the money back regardless, then the question is it a gift?
Right.
Right.
That was my question to begin with, was if they went on title and got a 20% interest, is it really a gift?
Well, but they can put anybody on title. So I would say that, it is a gift because the gift letter stated such, and that it was to not be repaid. And sometimes people go on title for the sole purpose of making sure that in the event some type of event occurs, they can be a part of the disposal of the property.
Got it. Then I guess the risk, if you're unmarried out there, that I'm thinking in my head is if you got someone else on title with you, whether it's parents or two people or whatever, we're talking from a divorce perspective. But of course, relationships also end sometimes just by death, frankly, and so remember, whoever you have on title to your property, you're going to be owning that potentially with their heirs. So think about that when you're thinking, oh, let's just add this person to it and let's add this person to it because they gave us $1,000 here and $5,000 here and $20,000 here. Like, be really careful because you could ultimately be owning your house with someone you don't want to own it with. And if they don't agree with what you want to do with the property, there's legal actions they can take against you to force the house to be sold, among other things. Speaking of that, so we're talking about unmarried people buying houses together. There are a lot of people that may be getting married and have been renting for a while together, and then they decide they want to buy a house. I think these exact same things would apply in those situations as well. It doesn't matter from your perspective if they're married or not, because you're just looking for income and debt ratios, and is this a gift, is this not a gift, who's going on title, and who's going to be on this loan.
Right. 100%.
All right. Well, before you get to that point, and if you're thinking about getting married, I know something you and I are both big fans of are prenups. My reason for that is because I think it helps reduce a lot of headache and heartache and hassle and stress if your relationship does end up ending in divorce. But I think the thing people forget about a lot, and this is something we talked about before, is how much clarity and vision and goal setting it actually can help you on the front end and can strengthen your relationship before you head into marriage. So do you want to give a little insight on that from somebody who's been around the block a few times?
If we believe marriage is about communication, right? And I think everybody would agree that's important. Like, that's one of the biggest things. Why would we not communicate about the one thing that most people fight about most often? There's hundreds of examples where the conversation around a prenup uncovers things that someone didn't know that caused them to pause. Secondarily, there's also conversations around prenups that cause people maybe to feel closer than they ever were, maybe more aligned financially. And what a great outcome to that conversation. But regardless, the communication is going to come up at some point. So in my mind, if you have less to fight about later in your marriage because you've outlined the things that are important to each of you from a financial perspective within your prenup, then you're going to have a happier marriage because it's there, it's identified. Doesn't mean that we're not moving forward as a couple and building something special together. It just means that in the event things go south, we've already talked about in writing what would occur in that instance. And again, to me, it means there's a less likelihood that you're going to fight. And when you fight less, you get along more. When you get along more, you're happier, and the love is better for everybody. So prenups is something that I would tell you that might just save your marriage, to be quite honest.
No, I think that's a great point. And I sad to say on some levels, but also happy to say on others that we have stopped some folks from entering into what might not have been the best partnering for them, negotiating prenups and uncovering some of these behaviors and things that you were talking about. But we've also had people that have come back to us 15, 20. I've been doing this now since 98. So 20 plus years later, and say, we did that and we got really solid on our plan moving together, and we figured out how we were going to create joint assets, and we figured out how we were going to protect the things we came in. Because I think marriages are getting delayed. You and I are at our age where people started dating and maybe married the person they dated in college, and they got married at 22. People are getting married in their 30s now, and they've created may already own a house. They may already have retirement. They've already created assets and such. And so I think we also have to be sensitive to, we don't want the marriage to end, but we also don't want to necessarily have to share the things we created before we ever knew you.
Right.
So I think that's another reason too that we're seeing that prenups have helped create some clarity around that, I know, for some clients. And then they've gone on to do great things and ventures together and said, we created this together. Like, I got my thing over here, she's got her thing over here, but we did this together and it brought us closer together.
And I don't think about this type of stuff because it's not my profession very often, but now that I'm thinking about it, what's the chances that a couple getting divorced would have an easier divorce if there was a prenup involved?
Almost 100% chance.
Well, if that's true, and I believe that probably is true, if that's true, and that 50% of marriages end in divorce or whatever that stat is, then you've got a 50% chance that what you're doing is going to be necessary, number one. And then number two, in the event of divorce, is probably going to save a lot of additional stress. And it's already such a stressful experience. It just seems to me that if you had less to fight about later in life, again, you might avoid divorce altogether. But in the event that you don't, here's our prenup. Let's save a little money on the legal side of things. Let's make the process quicker. Clearly, it didn't work out. We're moving on. And this roadmap helps us do so faster.
Yeah, I would say the only time really a prenup doesn't make a divorce easier is when, candidly, it was a badly written prenup and nobody can tell what it means and where these assets fit. Or where there's a real argument about the value of something. And I'm thinking like a business they built together, maybe a piece of artwork, something that's not so easy to just go out and get an appraisal like a piece of real estate can be. And even with that, there's some flex on, is this going to be valued as a rental property? Is this going to be valued as a home, etc., and those things. But really it's valuation or classification if the prenup's written badly about what is and isn't marital property. But to your point also, we're seeing a lot of people getting married a second and third time as well. And those stats are hovering around 50% of marriage is what they say, but it's really about 45 for first marriages, and it increasingly goes up for your next marriages. So if you are getting remarried and you have a reason that you want to protect assets, maybe for your children from your first marriage, or just because you've amassed some wealth that you've already been through it once and you don't want to have to divide your estate in two again, the likelihood goes up of a divorce. And so to your point, if you can put a roadmap out there that gives you some guidelines to follow that's going to simplify it on the back end and save you a ton in legal fees and headache, because I always equate legal fees with headache most of the time. That's funny as a lawyer to say, but it's true, right? Yeah. Like the more headaches you have, the more the legal fees are.
Well, and the reality in your world is you guys are pros at what you do. And so you want the best outcome for your clients, not necessarily from a fee perspective to you, because there's plenty of business to go around. You're better off to make happy endings for your clients as much as possible so that they can share your information and your firm's information with people that they care about who might go through something similar.
Yeah. And I think that they're still taboo, prenups.
Sure.
A lot of people think, oh, this means you think we're going to get divorced when you bring up this topic. And I just try to remind people, like, we plan for death. We plan for death by doing wills, by doing trusts, by doing estate plans. We plan for this. That's 100% certain. It's going to happen to all of us. Technology has not caught up with us yet, right? And divorce may or may not happen. But as Mark said, it's a 1 in 2 chance.
So you referenced something that I haven't thought about before when you were talking about the fact that the second marriages are higher percentage chances of divorce than first marriages. Okay. And obviously second marriages also generally have kids involved. And so from a prenup perspective, it just seems like out of respect for the kids, it would make their lives easier to have a great relationship with your new spouse if it's clearly defined as to what would occur in the event of a divorce. It just, from a transparency perspective, if you know where everybody stands in writing, it appears to me that it would avoid a lot of barriers to kids being open with that new spouse as a relationship going forward.
Yeah, you're right. And we've certainly had those folks come in, right? And they've said, my kids want me to get this prenup and I don't understand. And I've had to say what you said more directly and not as polite as you said it, which is, well, do you blame them? Like, their parents have gotten divorced. It's been a couple of years since that happened, and they want you to be happy and you have the right to move on.
Sure.
But at the same time, they don't know this person. Like, they don't know anything about this person whatsoever. And internally, whether they want to acknowledge it or not, they're seeing it as a threat.
Yeah.
They're seeing it as a threat, and they're thinking, we don't even know if this person's going to be around to take care of you, Dad. Like, and if she leaves you and walks away with lots of stuff, what's left to help us take care of you? Like, because their ultimate goal is to help take care of you. And that's not to say that it's being about greedy or about taking Dad's money or anything like this, but it's just, it would give another layer of confidence and trust and allow them to maybe have less suspicion and threat feelings about the new spouse if you started your marriage off with a prenup, I think.
It seems to me that it would make that relationship between child and new spouse so much better, because there's just no concern. There's no concern about everybody's intent. And you can just go through building that relationship with complete confidence about long-term intentions. And again, with that percentage being higher, that's the only reason I brought it up. With the percentage being elevated, it just seems like one more reason to sign a prenup, which causes less arguments. And, ultimately every party knows where each other stands.
Yeah. So just kind of to bring it full circle, we started this off talking about people buying houses together unmarried. And I guess that's the last place I'll work in prenups without getting to sound too preachy about them is, the prenup is not valid until you're married. But we see people starting to buy houses together before that marriage date.
Correct.
So you can address in your prenup what you're going to do with that house you bought before you got married. And you can say things such as, hey, as soon as we get married, we're going to now title it as tenancy by the entireties as spouses, which means you'd have more protections in the eyes of the law than you do if you just own it as unmarried people. And so that's another good thing to just kind of paper the deal, if you will, to say, hey, it was always our intent for this to be joint property, and it was joint property, but now it's really marital property. And so you can do that, because we've had some horror stories where people have bought property together and one person was the person making the mortgage payment. They never got married. Came time to sell the house, and even though they were both on title, the proceeds don't get divided evenly because the other person couldn't show they contributed anything to the house, even though they had paid all the utilities and all the groceries and all these other things. The rules aren't the same for unmarried people as they are for married people. So you want to get that house, typically, you want to get that house titled over as a marital couple. And if you put a prenup in place, that means that y'all have a written document saying that you're going to do it, which is another commitment thing.
Yeah. And, maybe the way to look at it is nobody struggles with understanding why they should buy health insurance, right? Not everybody has it, but they understand the value. The state mandates that we have car insurance. It's got to happen because things occur that you were not expecting, and therefore insurance is necessary. Maybe the best way for everybody to look at prenups is like, this is marriage insurance. Like, this is a written document that outlines that it's your policy, right? It's your insurance policy. Now, things still go south and cars still get wrecked and people still have poor health. But if you have an insurance policy to fall back on, it provides clarity with how to move forward for all parties. So, maybe I didn't even, that just came out, but I don't know. It seems like a great way to look at prenups as it's just marital insurance.
I had not quite put it that way either, Mark. That's a great way to look at it. And what I'm thinking is then the prenup basically is your deductible if you ever have to get divorced because you've just reduced your legal fees considerably.
That's a great idea. I like that.
Yeah, that's nice. All right. Well, if you want to learn more about how you should cover yourself, and qualify for, if you're not married or if you're getting ready to get married or you need your parents or a friend or somebody to help you out buying a house, this is your guy. Mark Wooten at First Home Mortgage in Cary, North Carolina. We'll drop his information in the bottom. Mark, thanks for being here.
Jenny, I've enjoyed it. It's been a great time. Certainly anybody that has a need, reach out. It doesn't have to be anything that includes us getting business. We want to be a resource. We've been in the Cary market for 30 plus years, and we're just a phone call away. So feel free to call. Thanks.